Columbia is a city in Boone County, Missouri, and serves as the county seat. It is home to the University of Missouri, and the city has a population of approximately 126,000. Columbia is located along Interstate 70 and US Route 63, making it a transportation hub in central Missouri. Janett Christman was born in Columbia on March 21, 1936, and was the eldest child of Charles and Lula Mae Christman. She had two younger sisters, Rita Christman Smith and Cheryl Christman Bottorff. Before settling in Columbia, the family lived in Booneville, Missouri. In Columbia, they ran Ernie's Cafe and Steakhouse, residing on the upper floor of the establishment while maintaining a reputable business in the college-orientated town, known for the Missouri Tigers football team. It was 1950, and at 13 years old, Janett Christman was an 8th grade student at Jefferson Junior High School. She was known for her strong work ethic, independence, maturity, and dedication to achieving her goals. She also had a dream of one day becoming a journalist. A devoted churchgoer, she actively participated in the choir, where she showcased her talent for playing the piano. Janett was also recognised for her intelligence and determination, balancing school, faith, and personal ambitions with maturity beyond her years. On the chilly evening of March 18, 1950, a dance party was planned for students, and several of Janett Christman's friends had invited her to attend. However, she declined, as she had already committed to a babysitting job. She frequently cared for children in two families, the Romacks and the Mullers, who were close acquaintances. That night, she was scheduled to watch over 3-year-old Gregory, the son of Ed and Ann Romack. Janett took the job with a specific goal in mind. She was saving up for an outfit she wanted to buy in time for Easter. Janett arrived at the Romack residence around 7:30 p.m. The family had recently relocated to a secluded home at 1015 Stewart Road, just outside Columbia. With Ann Romack expecting a child and the couple busy settling into their new home, they hadn't had a night out in quite some time. When the opportunity arose to spend the evening playing cards with friends, they took full advantage of it. Before leaving, Anne reassured Janett that their 3-year-old son, Gregory, usually slept soundly with the radio on and shouldn't be much trouble. Before leaving, Ed Romack instructed Janett on how to handle his shotgun, demonstrating how to load, unload, and fire it. He placed the firearm near the front door and advised her to keep it close in case of an emergency. The couple also emphasised that she should not open the door for anyone she didn't recognise and should turn on the porch light to see visitors clearly. With those final preparations, the Romacks left for their evening out at 7:50 p.m. As the night progressed, the weather took a turn for the worse. Temperatures plummeted and a storm rolled in, bringing rain, sleet, and strong winds. Later in the evening, from Moon Valley Villa, Ann Romack attempted to call home to check on Janett and Gregory. When no one answered, she assumed Janett had dozed off. At 10:35 p.m, Officer Roy McCowan of the Boone County Sheriff's Department received a panicked phone call. A distressed young woman was on the other end of the line, frantically pleading for help. Her voice was filled with panic as she screamed into the phone. McCowan recalled, quote, "I urged her to calm down and just tell me where she was. Then there was silence. Not the sound of a receiver being hung up, just silence." Just before the call abruptly disconnected, her final words were, quote, "Come quick." In the 1950s, law enforcement lacked the technology to trace phone calls or pinpoint their locations. With no way to track the source, officers could do nothing but wait and hope that she would call back. The Romacks arrived back home around 1 a.m. and immediately noticed something unusual. The porch light, which they had specifically left off, was now on, despite instructing Janett to only turn it on if someone came to the door. They also saw a sawhorse placed just outside one of the windows. When they reached the front door, they discovered it was unlocked. They cautiously entered their home and made a chilling discovery. Janett's lifeless body lay in a pool of her own blood, with a severe head injury from a blunt instrument and multiple puncture wounds on her face from what was thought to have been, quote, similar to a small lead pipe. Her skirt had been pulled up and her legs were spread apart, with a slipper hanging from her foot. There were visible scratches on her arms and face, and an electric iron cord was tightly wrapped around her neck. A few feet away, the phone lay off the hook on the floor, likely having fallen during her call for help. The kitchen and living room were both drenched in blood smears and fingerprints. Janett was just days away from her 14th birthday. Anne Romack quickly checked on their son, who was unharmed, while Ed immediately contacted the authorities. Since the Romacks' home was located outside the Columbia Police Department's jurisdiction, the Boone County Sheriff's Department became involved in the case as well. However, the two departments were unwilling to collaborate on the investigation. As the investigation began, search dogs followed the scent trail for about a mile, leading them to Stewart Road to West Boulevard, crossing over West Ash Street before the trail was lost. Back at the crime scene, authorities discovered adult male footprints near a side window that had been broken with a garden hoe. Many believed this was the point of entry, particularly after muddy papers were found on a nearby piano, suggesting the perpetrator had disturbed the area. During the inquiry, one law enforcement agency discovered that the sawhorse was positioned nearby the broken side window and garden hoe. However, the Romack family insisted the garden hoe was kept inside the house, suggesting it couldn't have been used by the intruder to break the window. It was also believed Janett must have known the attacker, as the porch light was on and the door had been left unlocked. Additionally, the shotgun near the front door remained untouched. A sheriff's deputy later described the crime as, quote, an inside job, suggesting that the assailant seemed to be familiar with the layout of the house. Fingerprints were collected as part of the investigation, and after the autopsy, it was confirmed that Janett had been both strangled and sexually assaulted. Local officers interviewed Janett's friends, family, and fellow students, while also receiving tips from the community. These efforts led to the identification of several potential suspects. However, it soon became clear that racial bias played a significant role in the investigation, as many of the men reportedly brought in for questioning were black members of the community who were unjustly considered suspicious. Despite these efforts, the investigation yielded no significant progress, and the police remained no closer to solving Janett's murder. After weeks of questioning family and friends, authorities were left without any leads or suspects in Janett's murder. Some speculated that her death could be linked to a similar crime that occurred 4 years earlier. In 1946, 20-year-old Mary Lou Jenkins was murdered in a manner strikingly similar to Janett. She was sexually assaulted, strangled with an extension cord, and found in a pool of her own blood, just a mile away from where Janett was killed. In their rush to solve the case, police focused on Floyd Cochran as a suspect. Floyd had previously shot his wife in an attempted murder, though he survived. He was interrogated for 2 days without legal representation. Floyd, a black man, became the target of widespread suspicion, and rumours quickly spread that he was responsible for Mary Lou's death. Tensions escalated, with angry mobs gathering outside the police station, ready to lynch him. The only link Floyd had to Myuu was that he was the garbage collector for the neighbourhood. He eventually confessed to the crime, but later retracted his statement, claiming he had been coerced by both the police and the mob. It is important to note that Floyd had significant mental challenges, so severe that he had been rejected from the World War II draft. Floyd was put on trial for the murders of both his wife and Myuu. He was convicted and executed by death sentence in a gas chamber on September 26, 1947. As the investigation into Janett Christman's murder progressed, a key suspect, Robert Mueller, emerged. The circumstantial evidence against him started to accumulate, strengthening his connection to the crime. Robert Mueller had been friends with Ed Romack since high school. After graduating, Mueller served as a captain in the Army Air Corps during World War II, where he earned a commendable service record. He eventually returned to Columbia, Missouri, where he managed his father's restaurant, Mueller's Virginia Cafe. By 1950, he was living in Columbia with his wife and working as a tailor at 27 years old. He had asked Janett to babysit for him on a few occasions. Another notable connection was that Robert also knew Mary Lou Jenkins from high school. Anne Romack recalled that Robert often made inappropriate sexual remarks about Janett and had told Ed Romack about his fantasies involving young virgins. The day before Janett's murder, Robert helped Anne with hemming a dress in her sewing room, where her iron was stored. Anne recalled feeling uncomfortable when Robert made an attempt to grope her breasts, which left her feeling uneasy. Robert was frequently seen carrying a mechanical pencil in the front pocket of his jacket, a tool he used often for his work as a tailor. This detail could potentially account for the unusual puncture wounds found on Janett's body. On the morning of Janett's murder, Robert Mueller called her to ask if she could babysit, but she had already made plans to care for the Romack family's child. She mentioned they were going to a friend's house to play cards, and later that evening, Robert attended the card game but left around 10 p.m, claiming he needed to check on a sick child at home. However, investigators found that he never returned to his wife and child during that time. The following morning, after news of Janett's murder began to circulate, Robert called Ed Romack and asked if he needed help cleaning up the crime scene. This was strange, as the details of the horrific scene had not even been made public. These inconsistencies led police to question Robert Mueller based on circumstantial evidence. Though they never obtained a warrant, they questioned him overnight without legal counsel. While Robert passed a lie detector test and the mechanical pencil he carried seemed consistent with the puncture wounds found on Janett's body, the grand jury ultimately decided there was not enough evidence to charge him. Robert later filed a lawsuit for defamation and civil rights violations, seeking over $300,000 in damages. He lost the lawsuit. Despite the suspicions and his involvement in the investigation, Robert Mueller was never charged with Janett Christman's murder and died in Tucson, Arizona in 2006. Both the Romack and Christman families agreed in the belief that Robert Mueller was responsible for Janett's murder. Although this tragic event is deeply unsettling, it has served as inspiration for several films, including the 1979 movie When a Stranger Calls, directed by Fred Walton and starring Carol Kane and Charles Durning. The film closely mirrors the chilling aspects of Janett's case, particularly the unsettling phone calls made to a babysitter while she is caring for children in an isolated home. In addition, Janett's murder is also believed to have influenced the infamous Babysitter and the Man Upstairs urban legend. In this tale, a babysitter receives repeated phone calls from a man who is seemingly watching her, only to later discover that the calls were coming from inside the house. The legend plays on the fear of an intruder and the terrifying realization that the threat was much closer than expected, much like Janett's own fate, where the killer's identity remained a terrifying mystery. This legend has since become a staple in horror lore, with numerous variations and adaptations over the years. The murder of Janett marked a significant shift in the sense of security and innocence in Colombia. In a town where doors were typically left unlocked, the crime led to a surge in demand for deadbolts and locks at local hardware stores. People who once knew each other by name became more wary. Postal carriers noted that women were increasingly reluctant to answer the door to receive packages, and babysitters became extremely scarce, particularly on Saturday nights. The community's once easygoing atmosphere was forever altered by the fear and uncertainty that followed the crime. Following the death of Janett, the Romack family relocated to Idaho Falls, Idaho, where they lived with the lingering sadness of never receiving definitive answers about Janett's murder. Anne passed away in the 1980s, and Ed remarried before he died at the age of 93 in 2016. Their son, Gregory, grew up to be successful and eventually settled in Alaska. Meanwhile, the Christman family remained in Colombia and continued operating their business until Charles Christman, Janett's father, passed away on September 24, 1974, at the age of 60. After his death, Lula Mae Christman moved to Kansas City, where she lived until her passing in 2009. Janett's sister, Rita, settled down with a loving partner and started her own family, while their youngest sister, Cheryl, who was just a baby when Janett was murdered, moved to Florida. Janett's murder left a lasting impact on those who knew and loved her. Her family was devastated, struggling to comprehend the loss of their bright, independent daughter and sister. The Christmans carried their grief for the rest of their lives, mourning not only Janett's absence, but also the lack of justice in her case. Janett Christman was laid to rest in Memorial Park Cemetery, Columbia, on March 21st, 1950, which would have been her 14th birthday.